John and Marina had been inseparable since their teenage days. Their relationship was a roller coaster full of fiery arguments, teary reconciliations, and just enough chaos to keep their circle of friends entertained like it was some kind of live soap opera. But, as the years rolled on, even their most patient spectators grew tired of the never-ending drama. Eventually, John set his sights on a technical college, choosing a different path, and with that, their story came to a close. At least, that's how it seemed. 7 years slipped by without so much as a real conversation between them, though Marina never quite let go. Quietly, from a distance, she kept tabs on John through social media, scrolling through photos and updates like someone thumbing through old love letters. Then, out of nowhere, fate stepped in. The two ran into each other at a buzzing club one night while celebrating their graduation at 22. Sparks flew instantly. Old feelings resurfaced, raw and familiar, and before long they were back in each other's arms. This time, things moved fast. They tied the knot and began a new chapter as husband and wife. Their once rocky history faded into the background, like a blurry scene from an old film. Together, they built a warm, steady life. When their daughter turned 3, Marina made the decision to step away from work. John backed her wholeheartedly, and she slipped easily into the rhythm of homemaking, fully embracing her role as mother and wife. But life, with its curious twists, had something unexpected up its sleeve. It happened one afternoon. Purely by chance, Marina ran into a stranger named Alex at a coffee shop. There was something about him that caught her attention, a quiet confidence, maybe, or the way he looked at her like he could see right through her. They began meeting occasionally, under the pretense of casual chats, though it didn't take long for those moments to deepen into something more. Eventually, Alex asked her out, an actual date, the kind that couldn't be passed off as a coincidence. Marina froze. For days, she wrestled with the idea, pacing the floor while trying to come up with a plan that wouldn't raise John's suspicions. In the end, she spun a tale her friend, supposedly devastated by a breakup, needed her urgently. John, none the wiser, nodded sympathetically. That night, after a quiet dinner, Alex suggested a nighttime drive through the city. The windows down, the breeze soft against her skin, it all felt surreal. When they pulled over by the water's edge, Marina couldn't hold back anymore. She kissed him fully, recklessly, and that kiss unraveled into something far more intimate, right there in the car under the glow of distant city lights. From that moment on, Marina led a double life. By day, she was the picture of domestic devotion, warm, attentive, endlessly giving. But in those secret hours stolen with Alex, she became someone else entirely, alive, desired, daring. She convinced herself it was working, that juggling two separate worlds somehow made her more whole. She felt radiant, like she'd finally figured out how to have it all. But illusions have a way of cracking. At first, it was just a nagging feeling, nothing more than a faint worry she pushed aside. Then one evening, after being intimate with John, he casually mentioned that her breasts looked fuller. She laughed it off, brushing it aside like it was nothing. But the comment stuck with her, echoing in her mind long after the lights were out. That night, she barely slept, her thoughts spinning out of control. By morning, she was already at the pharmacy, fumbling with a pregnancy test in the sterile white bathroom. 2 bold lines appeared, unmistakable. Her heart sank. Panic clenched her stomach as the truth set in: she was pregnant, and she had no idea whose child it was. What came next unraveled everything. The chemistry between her and Alex started to fizzle. His charm grew thin, replaced by red flags she could no longer ignore. He'd borrowed money from her time and time again, always promising to repay her but rarely following through. Lately, she'd been footing the bill for their dinners, quietly resenting the imbalance. In the midst of all this, she clung to one desperate hope: that the baby growing inside her was John's, not Alex's. After a long and agonizing stretch of soul-searching, Marina finally settled on what felt like the only right thing to do. She had to end things with Alex and come clean to John about the pregnancy. It wasn't an easy decision, and it came wrapped in fear. She suspected Alex wouldn't let her walk away without a fight, especially considering all the money she'd lent him. And sure enough, when she finally mustered the courage to confront him, her worst suspicions were confirmed. The moment she mentioned leaving, Alex's expression twisted into something cold and dangerous. "Oh, how thoughtful of you," he murmured with a venom-laced grin. "But here's the deal: you either pay me to keep my mouth shut, or your darling husband gets a front-row seat to our little love story." He held up his phone and gave it a casual twirl, letting the implication hang in the air like smoke. There's more than enough proof to blow up your cozy life, sweetheart. Just so we're clear. Cornered and frightened, Marina had no choice but to agree. She felt like she'd stepped into a trap with no exit. The thought of John learning the truth, of seeing his face crumple under the weight of betrayal, was unbearable. Not long after, Marina broke the news to John that they were expecting again. His face lit up with unfiltered joy. He'd been hoping for another child for quite some time, but had always respected Marina's hesitation. Now, with the decision seemingly made for them, he took it as a blessing. They celebrated the moment together, wrapped in a fragile happiness. Behind the scenes, however, Marina was quietly unraveling. Over the following 6 months, she funneled money from her personal savings into Alex's hands, doing everything she could to keep him silent. With each transaction, their financial buffer shrank, and panic began to gnaw at her. What would she do when the money ran out? How would she keep the truth from surfacing then? John, meanwhile, noticed her growing tension, but chalked it up to pregnancy stress. He stepped up, taking on more responsibilities, doing his best to be her rock. By late August, with their eldest daughter about to start school, he accompanied Marina to the hospital for the delivery. Hours later, his phone buzzed with a message: Marina had given birth. They were now a family of 4. John shut down his office early that day and cried quietly, overwhelmed with gratitude and love. Everything felt right for a moment. But that peace shattered only days later. On the 3rd day after Marina's hospital admission, John received an unexpected message from the building's security guard. Someone was waiting for him downstairs. Confused, he made his way to the lobby, only to be greeted by a man he didn't recognize. Alex. Without waiting for an introduction, Alex suggested they move somewhere more private. Once they were alone, he dropped the mask. With zero hesitation, he revealed the entire affair, laying it out like it was business. He pulled out his phone and, one by one, showed John a series of graphic photos: Marina, unmistakably, in his bed. Then came the video snippets of their flirty exchanges, audio clips, proof layered upon proof. John was speechless. His body went rigid as disbelief turned to rage. Alex, arrogant and smug, leaned back like he'd won something. That was all it took. John lunged and punched him, hard, sending him sprawling into the hallway wall. The two wrestled for only seconds before a nearby hospital security guard rushed over and pulled them apart. When Marina returned home a few days later, cradling their newborn in her arms, she was met not with the warm welcome she'd hoped for, but with a silent, stormy-eyed husband whose smile had vanished. John couldn't shake the nagging doubt creeping into his heart. Every time he looked at the baby, something didn't sit right. There were features, tiny, almost imperceptible details that reminded him of Alex. The thought ate away at him. And Marina, catching the subtle shifts in John's gaze, knew exactly what was going through his mind. That moment hit her like a wave. Alex had done more than betray her trust, he'd left behind a lasting mark. But how could she even begin to explain that to John? And more importantly, would it make any difference? The weight of unspoken truths hung heavy between them. Each was drowning in their own private storm. John, unable to live under a cloud of suspicion, decided he couldn't go on without knowing the truth. He told Marina flat out, everything, their future, their family, hinged on the DNA results. He wasn't going to raise another man's child, and he didn't try to soften the blow. His tone was blunt, his pain barely masked. When the results came back, the truth was final and brutal. John wasn't the father. Their marriage crumbled soon after. The divorce, though expected, still carried a sharp edge neither of them could dull. Yet, in the middle of it all, John showed a kind of grace Marina didn't expect. He stayed involved in their daughter's life, giving Marina pockets of time to breathe, regroup, and find her footing again. As for Alex, he vanished as suddenly as he'd entered her life. No more calls, no more demands, no more emotional blackmail. He disappeared into the background, leaving Marina with nothing but a trail of wreckage and a haunting silence that followed her everywhere. She felt oddly grateful for his absence, though it was hard to reconcile that with the months she'd spent feeding his ego and lies. Even now, she couldn't fully wrap her head around how she'd failed to see him for what he really was. But the damage was done, and the past couldn't be undone. All that remained was the long, painful process of learning how to move forward, carrying the weight of one catastrophic mistake born from a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment, and the very human desire to feel alive again.